Well, I lived close to the racetrack, and I remember the first night they were open, I walked up over the hill to the racetrack and probably snuck in, I don't remember, but and
the racetrack, we're talking Stateline.
Stateline.
Okay, right.
And I've been going ever since. And of course, I'm 4 or 5 years younger than Bobby Schnars, and I always looked up to him, and anytime I could get around his place, I was in my glory. You know, I don't think it is any one big thing. I mean, you hear about his clutch, that he was way ahead of time on that.
Right.
But
what was that, by the way, for the?
Well, it was smaller, and it took less force to get it to turn. You know, I remember probably in the 60s, late 60s, Esso came out with butyl tires. And maybe this has been on there before.
No, I haven't.
And what butyl tires were soft tires, you know. And back then you just bought what tires, street tires. And these Esso tires, Bob found out someplace about them that they were a softer compound, get more bite, they'd wear out faster, and we would go there again. You know, when we were out on our missions in the winter, all winter long, we'd get stocked up on them. You go to every Esso station in this part of the state and down into Pennsylvania. And pretty quick, I don't know, they weren't selling them because they'd wear out so much, so they quit making them. And then back then there was no such thing as Hoosier tires or American Racer tires. They were, you know, not around here. There might have been in Indianapolis or something like that, but it was all street tires. And the guy that could get the Esso butyl tires would help you out quite a bit. I hung around that garage for a lot of years, and I never knew it.
Is that right?
I mean, he wasn't one to brag about it, or, you know, he kept stuff like that to himself. I mean, he earned his living racing, and he'd pull that car in on Monday morning, and it would be on jack stands, and we'd, if I wasn't working, and we'd be up there helping him and looking around it, and he'd go over that car from, you know, one end to the other.
What was Bobby's reputation as far as temperament?
He tried to keep his pit crew in line, and sometimes it didn't work.
Is that?
Oh yeah, and
was there a guy in your group who was sort of the muscle?
Well, Big Jim Morrison early in the years, and then Cale Groves in the later years. You couldn't keep him under control, you know, and he would, the slightest, if you ever said something about this other driver, I think he'd just bum me for some reason. Cale would be right down there shaking the guy by the neck, you know, and that's, I'm not kidding about that. I mean, that was, and Bob would just stand back there and shake his head. And Floyd Finale was a tough guy.
Was he?
Yeah, and he wouldn't mind rubbing you the wrong way, and but as far as Bob, I don't know. And I think Bob was, I hate to say it, but Bob was fast enough it was hard to catch him. Yeah. Bob was always trying to figure out why Ronnie was fast. And there's another guy, Frank Roman, that built his cars, was ahead of his time. Right. We used to sit in those garages and make templates to brace the frame up. Not Frank, he'd cut the frames out. You know, and all the times that we spent bracing frames up and doing like that, well, after a while, I think Frank Roman was instrumental in building a light car, so he didn't have to have as much power. He didn't have to have as much brakes to get it stopped, and it was one, you know, and Bob learned that after a while. We're always searching for sponsors, And, you know, of course, the surf club was one of the better ones because when you weren't racing, you could go up there and talk about racing.
That's right.
You know? And Junie Shank treated us pretty good up there.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. And then Ronnie Schnars and I had a car together, and you know, after we built it in Bob's garage, and Ronnie would drive Stateline and I'd drive Erie, and I'll never forget, I wasn't much of a driver. 2 weeks in a row, the slow cars started up front, of course, so that's where I started. And 2 weeks in a row, I spun out on the first lap going into the first turn, and Blackmer hit me, and I took him out 2 weeks in a row. And after that, I thought, geez, maybe I ought to stay mechanicking. But Ronnie and I raced for a year, and we finally dissolved that. Squirt, you know, he had to be the, and Squirt had to be the, he was kind of the bad guy, you know, because he won too much. Now, if somebody booed Bob, I would boo Squirt if I was going to boo anybody, you know, because he won so much. Right. And a couple of times there, you know, they used to give the use of a car away for points championship. Right. And we just hated to see that car go all the way to far away Brockway a couple of times. Of course, Bob got it a couple of times too. Joe started on the pole one night, and it was a weird night, and he went on to win the race. And I never seen Bob so mad when he pulled in the pits and said, "Who won?" And we told him Joe Tomes. And Joe Tomes, and it was great for Joe, but he wasn't a winning car, you know. He just kind of lucked out, and everybody was crashing behind him. Yeah, Leonard and I don't know, remember why. Maybe Bob won a big race, but Leonard had a pretty big house there in Sugar Grove and a pool out back, and he invited us down. And I don't think he only did it once, because I don't think we were ever welcome back. Somebody. In fact, it was Dick Barton's uncle that was running a Sportsman, and he was in full clothes there, and I threw him in the pool, and Rod Barton. Rod Barton, okay. And yeah, and after that party, I don't think that Leonard ever invited us back.
You guys get together at all? You do?
Not really. Yeah. That's why I kind of looked forward to this.